Today, we continue with their annual Summer Sermons by Other People series. During the month of August, members of the UU community of Cambria will present sermons written and delivered by UU ministers or other prominent members of the religious and academic communities. Our readers are required to seek permission to present these sermons, and the sermon will be introduced by the reader. Today's sermon is titled, "The Answer I Wish I'd Given," by Reverend Erica Hewitt, and will be read by Susan Landau. Treva selected this sermon earlier this summer. Due to her father's recent emergency hospitalization and decision to go into hospice, she is in San Diego this weekend. This is an extraordinarily difficult time for her. Although we did not have a chance to discuss at length her reasons for choosing this message, she did write a response to the sermon that Susan will read at the conclusion. I personally feel that the message of this sermon also applies to those working in any social justice capacity, whether paid or volunteer work, including the teaching profession. Teachers are often asked why they choose a career that is traditionally underpaid and can be very stressful. Dedicated teachers always answer that they do it for their kids because they can. Susan?
The Answer I Wish I'd Given by Reverend Erica A. Hewitt. I had jet lag. That's my excuse. That, and it was a hot, humid Sunday afternoon in Chicago, the end of a 3-day family reunion. All of us were well fed and happy, but tired and well. The family had been together for 3 days. When my aunt remembered that she needed to return the flower vases to her church, I volunteered to jump in the car with her and my mom. To recap, I had jet lag. It was hot, and I was enjoying the peace of a Sunday drive. That's how I got caught off guard by a simple question. As for how the question arose, I recall only that my aunt mentioned her church's mission and outreach programs. Recently, the church had sent a team of volunteers to New Orleans, where citizens were still cleaning up 2 years after Hurricane Katrina had mowed a path of destruction through it. My aunt holds deeply conservative political values, which she holds in check under the best of circumstances. As I've already described, our weary afternoon was not the best of circumstances. That city has had 2 years to clean up, and they are still asking for help, she huffed. Tell me, Erica, why should we help them? There it was, the ball out of left field, the surprise attack on the right flank. Any way you look at it, I choked. I said, really? How do you begin to answer a question like that? We were talking about her church, and not just any church. It was a church that my mom and uncle attended as college students, the church where my parents had held their wedding reception, the church where my cousin was married, the church where, as a teenager, I heard the best sermon about Jesus I've ever heard. But clearly, the answer had eluded her. They seem to think they don't have to do anything, she continued, except sit and wait for other people to come help them. How long do they expect us to keep helping? Notice how many theys she was up to. Well, I fumbled. When I lived there, we used to joke that New Orleans is the most developed of all the third world nations. I mean, they operate under a different legal system. It was hard to work through the red tape when it was whole. Now it's a city with broken hope and broken infrastructure. So lovely, isn't it? How I decided to explain the civic and legal framework of New Orleans instead of answering my aunt's question. And, oh, friends, it gets worse. I proceeded to explain the quirks of land ownership and inheritance, for which my aunt had a counter-argument, until from the front seat, Ma Peacemaker Hewitt wisely drew our attention to a new subject. I was on vacation in Chicago that day, but apparently my personal angel was still at home. If she'd been on duty, or he, she would have dope smacked me lovingly before I'd utter my first sentence. She'd have put 3 words in my mouth when it fell open, 3 little words that formed the only possible answer to the question, why should we help? The answer I wish I'd given, because we can. Because we can. We should help because we can. We share what we have with others because we can. That's the quick and dirty answer. Ever since that hot summer day, my aunt's question has been stuck in my frontal lobe like peanut butter sticks to your palate. That's why I want to take my answer a little further. That, and because I think we all ask a version of that question from time to time. Why do we give? Take note. I hereby change my aunt's question from why should we help them to why should we help? I'm uncomfortable with the notion of them because it means that they are not part of us. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe in the interdependent web of all existence. Our human family is woven from the same fabric. I happen to feel a connection to New Orleans because I have lived there, and people I love still live there. Whether suffering rains down on New Orleans or Myanmar, Knoxville, or China, reaching outward in gestures of help is a means of reinforcing, of reweaving the frayed strands of our web connection. Whom we help is not as important as the fact of our helping. That helps rid the question of the distasteful word should. The new question becomes, why do we have a responsibility to help others? Even better, why are we called to give of ourselves? The question applies conveniently to any and all means of giving, whether it's our congregation, to our Unitarian Universalist movement, or to someone in need. The fact, however disquieting, is that giving often comes more easily when it's directed towards a crisis or toward the collective, i.e. entire cities or countries, than a total single stranger. When groups are in trouble, the victims of flooding, say, or political oppression, the need is evident. Our help is triggered readily. On an individual basis, though, we risk second-guessing ourselves, our inner instinct to share lost in a fury of suspicion and quiet judgment. At the highway exit near my house, there's usually a panhandler at the light, holding a sign and a hopeful expression that burns right through my windshield. Is it right to roll down my window and give him one of the dollar bills that I keep in my ashtray? And if you're ever in my neck of the woods, I drive a tan Corolla with Heart Others plates. I don't always lock the doors. Help yourself. As a church pastor, I receive out of the blue phone calls every so often from strangers who sing me their blues and recount terrible losses of luck. Am I called to take out the checkbook for the minister's discretionary fund created by my congregation and entrusted to me to ease their burdens for the night? These aren't uncommon decisions. In her book, The Samaritan's Dilemma, political scientist Deborah Stone parses a situation from her own life. A few years ago, our newspaper carried a local story headlined, "Panhandler Concerns Residents." It seems that every day a man stood holding a sign reading, "Hungry." Many residents complained to the selectman. When the topic came up at the selectman's next meeting, the chairman asked, "So what are you going to do, arrest him and give him a meal?" 60 years ago, that would have been precisely the response to a hungry vagrant in small town New Hampshire. He would have been taken to the jail if there was one, or an inn, or a home if there wasn't, and there he'd be fed. 30 years ago, a local official might have helped him sign up for food stamps or welfare. But now, feeding a hungry man would seem to be trouble waiting to happen. For another selectman advised the townspeople, the best way to avoid the problem is not to give out free food. To be sure, common morality still calls for feeding a hungry man. Yet today, when I tell this story and ask audiences what they think the selectman meant, everyone seems to know. It's as if I'd asked a kindergarten class the color of the sky. If you give out free food, the man will just keep coming back for more. Other people will come to town knowing that there's free food. If you help him, you're just enabling him. These answers pretty well summarize the new conventional wisdom. Help is harmful. Think twice before you do it, and do it with restraint. Aha, I think. There's the true chasm that my aunt and I were bickering across that day. The yawning gap between our two poles of belief. She believes that help should be given judiciously to those in need so as not to compound the problem. The problem being that, in her eyes, people ask for help when they don't really need it, or when they've grown dependent on the help of others. I've worked in enough soup kitchens, mental health clinics, and Habitat for Humanity sites to believe something different. Most people ask for help only when they're so strapped by their need that they're willing to exchange a piece of their dignity by calling attention to it. I've come to believe that most people will ask for help only as long as they need it. And moreover, that giving is helpful to both the recipient and the giver. In giving, we come to see and appreciate our own resources more deeply. There's a vast expanse between being responsible with our resources and fearfully hoarding what we have, attributing others with greed or laziness when their resources run thin. Here's another way of defining our respective views of the world. My aunt's experience is funneled through scarcity metaphors. Life is comprised of stockholders, zero-sum games and pies with only so many slices. A mentality Stone calls mine or thine. In contrast, and on a day when my personal angels aren't off gallivanting somewhere else, I see life moving in metaphors of abundance, continuity, circular flows, and widening ripples of mine and thine. Why are we called to give of ourselves? When my car and I are idling at the exit ramp, it might be prudent to ask myself, is this guy really homeless? What will he do with the money? Does he really need help? I'd hate to waste $1 after all, right? After careful consideration, it's a gamble I'm willing to take more often than not. I would rather hand him a dollar bill than sit with the uncomfortable grain of knowledge that I looked away from someone declaring himself in need. What, after all, is the true cost of purposefully looking through or past someone who's asking for help? When I pretend not to see another human being, it exacts a steeper cost, a dram of my soul, than a measly $1. It should be evident to you by now how I respond when a red light pins me in front of a panhandler, or a stranger visits my office with a burden that needs to be eased. I use common sense. Of course I do. I've called landlords to verify that someone is a day away from eviction, for example, but I do not examine homeless families for evidence of true poverty before paying for their motel room. Perhaps this is a Pollyanna-ish tack to take, this trust in strangers' integrity and their stories of need. But giving is, for me, both a statement of expression of my faith Excuse me, let me read that again. But giving is, for me, both a statement and expression of my faith. I give in all the ways I give, from all the means I can give, with intention. I give to strangers in need. I give to my congregation with its mission to transform its members so that we may transform the world. I give to Unitarian Universalist organizations, such as the UU Service Committee and my district's Chalice Lighters program, so that my monetary statement of faith is amplified by merging with the gifts of others. I give because I choose not to harden my gaze and narrow my heart. I choose not to be seduced from my perch, where abundance is visible and alive in the world, by the siren song of, "There's not enough, hang on to what's yours." On most days, when my personal angel, my muse, my cerebral cortex, whatever, clocks in on time, alert and ready to guide me, I remember that I give because I can. For me, I can is a reflection that much of what I have, I did not earn. I received it freely from the generosity and privilege of others. What's mine isn't entirely mine any more than the oxygen that flows through these lungs of mine. I wish for a portion of my resources, along with my goodwill, to reverberate through the universe, doing good in as many ways as possible. There are innumerable ways to name the forces that compel us to help others, all of them overlapping and none of them more important than the rest. You're a generous people. You have your own reasons for helping, for giving. Know them, examine them, practice articulating them. Because here's the truth. It's not that my angel failed me on that humid Sunday in Chicago. I failed. I failed to speak with the full conviction of my faith and the bold power of my love for this crazy patchwork family of human beings to which we all belong. I didn't know how to answer my aunt's question on that long ago summer afternoon, but I know the answer now. I will never be caught off guard again. Treva wrote this and asked me to read it after the sermon. She actually wrote it on her iPad, it said. Hewitt's sermon, although from 2009, is timeless. I struggle with understanding why some people question the motivations and intentions of those who help others. People who volunteer their time to help others, or in some case, volunteer their time to help organizations, such as homeless shelters, food banks, or even churches, do so because it's the right thing to do, because there's a need that someone has to fulfill, and they are called to fill it. It would behoove us all to stop questioning motivations and intentions of others who help, and instead step up to the plate ourselves and do the right thing, to help because we can, because it's the right thing, not because we get anything out of it. If more people were to step forward to help, the question would no longer be, why do you help? But why are others not helping? Why are others not doing the right thing? Thank you.